So, welcome to another episode of the audio version of the Metal Wanderlust. And I'm currently on the line with somebody who's infamous, famous. I don't know. How do I kind of describe it? How's it going, Alexander?
It's going good, man. How are you?
Good. So, I know, I thought initially that you'd be kind of tired of this, but let me ride the wave. What point did you realize you were blocked by Chris Barnes on Twitter?
Let's see. Well, he was just talking crazy on Twitter. He was just saying all kinds of really like grumpy and disgruntled stuff about modern metal bands, and I just thought, you know what, this dude's been running his mouth for a long time. Like it's probably past due that somebody stands up for themselves around him. So I just like tried to clap back at him a little bit, and I think he blocked us pretty much instantly after I
But so wait,
quote tweeted him. So
is this
it was within
pre?
seconds.
But was this pre or post the roundtable?
Post.
Wow. Okay.
So
Okay.
the roundtable happened, and he tweeted a bunch about it. And he was basically saying that he watched it and it made him feel physically ill, and he despised what death metal had become. So I just responded to it, and I was basically like, "You're a bozo," and then he blocked us. It is what it is.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy because I was telling you before we started recording, right? Like I work in marketing, and a lot of what I do is like advise brands on what to do on social media. And at some point, I was joking with somebody earlier that is this all like a ploy to get like more people to listen to like Corpse Grinder's album? And the moment I got on the call with you, I was like, wait, is this a viral campaign for like Undeath's album?
It feels that way sometimes. I mean, yeah, like I was telling you before we went on, like we've been talking about sending him like a gift bag or something because he's done so much free press for us, and it's like, hey man, thanks for getting our name out there.
Yeah, and the thing is about the whole thing, right? Is first of all, the metal community is so small. It's not like metal is what it was in the 80s or 90s where you had the numbers, and then you kind of filter it down to death metal, and especially a band like Undead, who I must really congratulate you over the last 3 years. You guys have been all over the place. So let's take a step back, right? Like when you guys were like forming, because if I'm not mistaken, you all started off as a two or three piece.
Yeah, we started off as a three piece. It was just I was doing vocals, and it was Kyle playing guitar and Matt playing drums, and that was the lineup for like the first year and a half of the band, pretty much.
And it's kind of, since you all come from Rochester, New York. I was talking to a few weeks ago to Robert Vigna from Immolation, and I was kind of telling him just like, oh my god, first of all, did you even realize you would kind of spawn this New York death metal sound? So I have to ask you, how influential was just being in that area to you just growing up and starting a death metal band?
Oh, it's definitely influential. I mean, I don't know if it's like a conscious thing. Like we don't sit down at practice and say like, let's write a song that sounds like Cannibal Corpse, so let's write a song that sounds like Immolation. Like all these great classic New York death metal bands. But it's in the water. It's in the atmosphere. If you're from this part of the world, like you can't help but grow up with a nice, healthy affection for all of the great death metal bands that have come from this area. So, and it just helps that like those bands, like the New York bands, whether it's Cannibal, Suffocation, Internal Bleeding, all that stuff, like those are our favorite bands. So we're all just actively listening to that stuff all the time. So it seeps into like the DNA of our music in a way, whether we want it to or not.
Yeah, and I still remember getting your first album, which was Legions of a Different Kind, and like I'm old school in that way that I'll look at the artwork first and be like, okay, what kind of band is this? There was no two ways about it. Like there was no like second guessing. What kind of sound does this band have, right?
Yeah, we try to keep it nice and clear for people what you're going to get into when you listen to one of our records.
Yeah, and I must ask. I mean, because of course hindsight is 2020. Did you even expect Legions of a Different Kind to kind of blow up the way it is? I mean, I don't think in 2020 there was one I mean, best of the year or album of the year list where you guys weren't mentioned. So
Yeah, I mean, dude, I mean, no, I mean, I don't think any of us anticipated the response it got at all. And I mean, I'm constantly just honored and truly grateful for all of the positive attention that record continues to get. I mean, it's just crazy, man. I mean, we've all been in bands in the past, and we've all like kind of pounded the pavement and done our own thing and just tried to get like any kind of recognition or just like acknowledgement for the music that we make. And I think when we made Legions, we knew that we had really like put our heart and soul into it in a way. You know, we knew that we tried really hard on that album. We busted our asses to make a good death metal record. And I think when we released it, we were just kind of thinking like, you know, I hope our friends like it, and I hope that people who liked our demos like it. But it turned into something so much bigger. And yeah, like I said, I'm just like honored by the response for it.
yeah, and from what I read, the deal with Prosthetic actually came over Instagram.
It did. Yeah, Steve over at Prosthetic, Steve Joe, he's like kind of like the US point guy at Prosthetic. He's the man. He's the nicest, realest dude. And yeah, I remember I was at a bar, and I was just like sitting waiting for my girlfriend to get out of work, and I was just drinking a beer, and then I saw that Prosthetic followed us on Instagram, and we were just talking about it in the UNDEATH group chat, like, oh, that's funny, Prosthetic followed us, like, ha ha ha, when's the deal coming, like, when are they gonna sign us? And then like an hour later, Steve DM'd us. It was like, hey guys, like, I really like your demos, you working on a full length, like, let's talk. And we were like, holy shit, it's actually happening. So it was crazy.
Yeah, and even like when I was reading about the album, right? Because Kyle and the rest of the band members actually recorded it in a studio. You recorded vocals separately.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say that's absolutely right. I did. You know, I was working a job at that point. I was doing like secretarial work for a law firm, and I just had like really demanding hours, and I couldn't find the time to drive down to Philly and record with them. So they just did the entire record in 3 days, pretty much instrumentally, and drove back up to excuse me, Rochester, and yeah, we just tracked all the vocals in my house and in like
Wow.
my little side room in my apartment. And yeah, it was a very hectic time.
Yeah, I mean, wow, 3 days. That's like really, really
Dude,
hectic.
I mean, with it's crazy. Like with this new record, we had like 2 weeks in the studio, so we had so much time. And as we were doing that, I was constantly asking myself, like, how the fuck did we record an album in 3 days? Like, I don't think we could ever do that again.
Yeah, but I'm glad you kind of brought up the recent recording because I wanted to get into that because was that done separately or, rules were kind of relaxed where you could all be in a studio together this time?
We did it together. Yeah, there were some COVID restrictions in place. It was like masks on in the studio at all times. Uh, we all had to pass like a PCR test before we got down there. So they were definitely, I mean, the headroom where we recorded it and everybody who works there they're super accommodating and like very professional studio. But yeah, they were just trying to keep everybody safe, and they wanted to make sure obviously that none of us were sick when we got down there. So thankfully none of us had COVID, and we just had to make sure that we had masks on at the studio whenever we were tracking. And it was, other than that, it was just like any other time in a studio, you know. But
Yeah.
just the addition of masks kind of reminded you that, oh yeah, there's a pandemic going on.
Yeah. And, I just wanted to take a step before the recording, right? I mean, like I mentioned earlier, since you didn't expect the kind of accolade that Legions of a Different Kind got, uh, very aptly, you'll have actually named your new album, It's Time to Rise from the Grave. Was that like, what was your headspace going into just the writing? Because, if for a band to do well on its debut album, sophomore album, I mean, there is a cliche about it and stuff like that. Uh, Was that like playing in your head, or you're like, you know what, we're still that demo band kind of scrappy young band?
I think, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think we always kind of envision ourselves as scrappy, no matter what we do. Kyle and I and Tommy, our bass player, pretty much everybody in the band, honestly, comes from a very like DIY punk and hardcore like background. We're all like metalheads through and through, but most of us grew up going to like going to and booking your own shows around like punk and hardcore and stuff like that. So that kind of ethos, the do it yourself mantra and stuff like that is really ingrained in us. So however big our team gets and the amount of like support that we get, we always kind of view everything with the mindset that we have to make it happen ourselves first. So as far as the title specifically goes, I mean, I don't know what was going on in Kyle's mind when he came up with it, but I remember vividly one day we were at practice, like I don't Legions had probably been out for like 2 months, and we were already like finishing writing pretty much for the next album, and he just turned to me and he was like, "Dude, I'm thinking about calling the next album It's Time dot 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 to Rise from the Grave." And I was like, "Bro, that's it. Like, that's the title. Like, I don't care what other ideas you have between now and when we record it. Like, that has to be the title. I love it so much. I don't necessarily know what it means, honestly, but I just think it's just a crazy, memorable title for a death metal record, and I'm glad that we
Yeah,
stuck with it.
yeah. I mean, like if you just keep the artwork aside, right? That's just a great text to have on, right? With your, of course, undecipherable logo. I mean, like, good luck to anyone trying to figure out what the band name is looking at the logo. But that's just a great fucking title. So that's why I had to ask you about it. But I'm very curious, and I have to ask you about the artwork. I mean,
Yeah.
it's death metal, so there's no surprises there. But you guys, unlike most bands, will not go for your typical Photoshop kind of artwork. This is like reminds me of what it was like to look at you know album covers from the 80s and 90s, like the classic Roadrunner era and stuff like that. I'm definitely sure you're familiar
Mhm.
with that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, like you said earlier, what we're all of us are the kind of people where the artwork is the thing that sells the record for us first. Like we all gravitate towards cool covers, and uh, I mean, we're so lucky that we have somebody like Matt in the band, our drummer, who also does all of our album artwork, because he's just in addition to being a great drummer, he's just like a really talented artist, and his style is so unique and it's so like detail oriented and just crazy looking. And uh I remember he drew the logo for us back when we first started, and we were like, holy shit, like I didn't realize you were like this crazy. Like we just didn't realize he had that in him. And then he all of a sudden he was like pitching us covers and stuff like that too, and we were like, dude, yeah, like you're our guy from now on. So I think as long as Undeath is a band, we're never really going to have anybody else do cover artwork for us. He's a wizard with a pen and ink.
Yeah, and that's cool, right? At least like you don't have to kind of explain the concept or break it down. You like got an in-house guy in there. uh
Yeah,
i
definitely.
mean i mean I noticed, at least in past interviews, you mentioned that with Legions of a Different Kind, Kyle did the lyrics. Was that something that you kind of contributed to this time?
So Kyle definitely still did like the vast majority of the lyrics. It's just kind of we've had like a really good relationship where like our process has been very smooth. He'll we'll go to practice and he'll present me with like 70 to 80% of the finished lyrics for a song. He's like, what do you think about these? And if I have any input, I'll add it. But generally, by the time the song gets to me, lyrically, it's done. He has all the vocal patterns of the lyrics in mind. So at that point, it's just my job to execute the performance as best as I can. And it's been working really well so far. And honestly, like Kyle has such a great ear for like great vocal patterns and hooks and memorable choruses and stuff like that. Like I think if he left it up to me to write lyrics, I would do a terrible job. so,
Right.
so I mean, generally my lyrical contributions to the band are like adding swear words. so, so like I think we have a pretty rock solid working relationship going right now.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, like, I was just kind of wondering if the dynamic kind of changed this time around. But tell me, at least in terms of the recording and rehearsal, because like with most of the bands that we've spoken to in the last couple of years, at least I've spoken to, it's been tough, right? I mean, a lot of bands that were jamming regularly just couldn't, and they were all like stuck at home. What kind of headspace were you all going into the recording in there? Because like there was no touring happening for the longest time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting. We when we were gearing up to release Lesions, we had some tours being booked. It was nothing that extravagant. I mean, we were going to go out, do like some West Coast stuff. We were going to do some dates with this band Phobophilic that we're all really big fans of. And then obviously, COVID happened and lockdown kicked in and all of that stuff went out the window. And I don't really think there was we were all obviously disappointed, but I don't really think there was a moment where we like gave up or got really down on ourselves about it. We were just like, okay, for the foreseeable future, this is just what life is going to be like. We're like, I don't know if touring is coming back. I don't know if it's going to come back at all. So we might as well just put our heads down and get back to writing because it's all we can do at the moment. So there was never really like a woe is me atmosphere in the band around any of the COVID stuff. It's just the way it was. And we just tried to roll with the punches as well as we could. And thankfully, I mean, September of last year, we were able to go on tour with a Black Dahlia Murder. And that was huge for us. I mean, that was the first time that we ever got to play any of those songs off Legions live for an audience. And those shows were amazing. So I'm grateful that things cleared up in time for us to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I'm kind of jealous that the fact that y'all kind of share the stage with Trevor, and I like how I'm just calling him Trevor, but I think he's like a huge champion of underground metal. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the demo I first heard about through his column that he does, and I have no idea. Maybe you can give me an insight. Where does he get time to listen to all that extreme metal, man?
I don't even know, dude. I mean, he's such like a humble and gracious dude that I'm sure he is sick of me saying this, but like, I mean, we really owe a lot of like our exposure as a band to him specifically because he, like you said, he's such a champion of smaller bands. I mean, he listens to such a magnitude of music. It's kind of baffling, but
Yeah.
from the very beginning, I mean, he was like our first big supporter as a band. I remember even when the first demo was out and we had like 100 or less followers on Instagram, he was like, I remember when he followed us and he was putting us on playlists and like tweeting about us from the very beginning. So it was an honor to finally be able to play shows with him. I mean, he's just like the best dude.
Yeah, and I think like that's what's been cool about this time, right? Like you said earlier, he had the column on Metal Injection, and then later he kind of switched it over just to a Spotify playlist, which is so much easier because you can straight up like listen to all these bands. And
Mhm.
I'm so glad like I checked it out because I'm 100% sure I came across you guys through him. But
Yeah, I think a lot of people did, and like he would. I feel bad like punishing him about it, but I mean, like it's true. He's just he was really instrumental early on in like getting our band out there, and I can't thank him enough for that.
yeah, totally agree. But what was that like? I mean, like, just playing these songs live, because now, and correct me if I'm wrong with the timeline, but when you all recorded the album, you all was still a three-piece or a five-piece by then?
Uh, the new album.
I'm talking about Lesions.
So when we recorded Legions, we were still a three piece.
Okay.
Kyle did all the guitars, all the bass on that. And then by the time we released Legions, we were a 5 piece.
Yeah.
So when we went into the studio to record the new album, that was the first time we'd ever recorded as like a full band.
Yeah. And what was that like? Because I want to know, like, I'm glad at least you all got that time as a 5 piece to kind of play these songs live, because it, I guess, builds that camaraderie also, but gets you prepped to kind of go in studio, right?
Totally, yeah. And I think early on, a lot of people assumed that we were a 3 piece out of some kind of like artistic choice, but that's not the case at all. I mean, like we it was pure desperation. We couldn't find a bass player or guitar player anywhere, and we just wanted to play shows so bad that we just went out and did it as a 3 piece. But the entire time we desperately wanted to add a good bass player. We desperately wanted to add a sick second guitar player, and things just lined up perfectly. We got Tommy and Jared. Tommy's our bass player, and Jared is our other guitar player. We kind of like folded them into the band right around the same time. So, that was probably like the spring of 2020 when we got them in. And we just had all this downtime with COVID, and we were kind of exiting like the scariest part of the lockdown. Like, infection rates were kind of going down, and the spike was dipping a little bit. So we just would try to practice as much as possible because we didn't have anything else to do. And by the time we got into the studio, the following year, early 2021, to record this new record, we were already like very tight and very we were a well-oiled machine as a band by that point, because we had so many practices as the 5 of us. So it was awesome. It was awesome finally getting to like record as a full band.
Yeah, and I am glad at least that happened for you and you got that time together, right? Because it would be a bummer if you were again recording individual parts and sharing, because I believe at least quite a few bands have been doing that for the last year or so.
Yeah, totally. And thankfully, like 4 out of 5 of us live in Rochester, so it's not hard for us to, at least the 4 of us, get together and share ideas. And I mean, Kyle and Jared live together, so they're constantly just like
Oh
bouncing
my
riffs off.
God.
Yeah, they just have to like walk across the hall to like show each other a riff. Uh, and the only downside really is that Tommy lives in like right outside of DC, so we don't really get to practice as a full band with him too much. But I mean, he's a trooper. I mean, he drives up as much as he can just to like work on stuff with us and show us song ideas and stuff like that. So we have a really good dynamic as a band going right now.
I was just thinking about the whole situation with Kyle and Jared, where sometimes it's a good thing, but sometimes it's also a bad thing, right? Where you're just like, okay, we need some space between each other.
No, absolutely. I mean, they thankfully, like all of us are pretty low key, like indoor people, so there's not a lot of like huge personalities in our band, not a lot of big egos. So uh, generally everybody gets along just fine and is able to bounce ideas off each other and not hurt anyone's feelings.
Yeah, and I can imagine, right? Like when you go from a 3 piece to a 5 piece, it's a bit of an adjustment and a change. And then when you're all like touring together, that's like, baptism by fire of sorts, right?
Yeah, totally. But it's also like it's really exciting, just like the prospects of what we can do as a band now, because when we were recording Legions, even we wanted to have all these more intricate parts on it. We wanted it to be just 100% death metal, of course, but we wanted to have more solos, more harmonies, stuff like that. And you can't really do that live with just one guitar player. So it was amazing finally adding Jared and Tommy to the band, because I feel like it just opened up this whole new spectrum of worlds that we could visit musically.
I
You're
just
good,
want to
man.
take a step back to what you said in terms of, studio versus live, right? Since you've been listening to death metal and metal for a while, you're familiar with that, how a lot of bands kind of cheat, so to say, in the studio, right? Where they're kind of adding these whole things or recording at halftime and stuff like that. Is that part of your writing process, or at least Kyle's writing process, that we're going to write music that we can actually pull off live, because otherwise
Yeah,
it's not the same experience that's coming in for the audience.
definitely. I mean, I always view Undeath as like a live band first and foremost. I think obviously the studio stuff is really important, the records are important, but I mean personally, I can't speak for anybody else in the band, but I always feel like the real experience with Undeath is like going to a show and seeing us, because I feel like the songs are written in a way that they're meant to be heard in a live setting. So I can't imagine we would ever write anything that we couldn't pull off live.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And especially there's a lot of times, I mean, not that we get to go to that many shows anymore here in India, because the live metal scene is kind of dead, but
Mm,
you can kind of tell when it's kind of, you know, studio magic or wizardry or whatever you want to call it, and then you can't really pull it off live. So, and I think there's also certain genres of metal that kind of are okay with it.
mm.
Like you'd have backing tracks and things like that. But with death metal, it's just like, you know, visceral, in your face. You want, like we were talking earlier, right? You want that bass or that snare to just like slap you repeatedly, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think like for a lot of bands, the whole atmospheric element and the backing tracks and stuff like that works for them, and that's great. But for us, it's just never been our thing. We take a lot of pride in the fact that, like, we if we can't pull it off live, let's just not even bother trying to do it. And I think whether it's death metal or honestly like any kind of live music, when a band is performing without a safety net, when you're getting up there and you're just playing your amps and like anything could happen, you could have some catastrophic technical failure at any moment and everything could just go downhill. It Knowing that in the back of your mind that there's that danger there, it makes the experience so much better, both as a performer and as an audience member, because you're bearing witness to something real and like raw happening in front of you. And I feel like once you start fucking around with layers upon layers of backing tracks and like just vocal dubs and stuff like that, it becomes a different thing. And I don't want to talk trash about any bands that do that, because it can be very successful for them, but it's not Undeath.
I mean, I have two questions which I actually am very curious to know personally from you, right? Is the first part is, at which point, or has it reached that point for you as yet, where you realized, holy fuck, like I'm in a band that's really popular, and people really want to hear me out? Because when the album released in 2020, you weren't like going out and stuff like that, right? Everyone was kind of locked in. So I'm guessing it had to do with something online, or it hasn't hit you as yet.
That's a really good question. I mean, I think it has hit me, but I'm just like struggling with how to acknowledge it. Like I just it pretty much the entire time that I've been alive, honestly. Well, like ever since I started actively listening to music, the thing that I've wanted to do is be in a band that was self-sustaining and stable and was able to tour and have like an audience and stuff like that. And uh the fact that it's kind of like happening for me now and happening for our band is unbelievable. And like I said, I'm just like so over the moon and so grateful about any of the response and the positive attention that we get. But I think like it kind of like hits me every day, because some days I wake up and I'm like, does anybody actually like Undeath? Like, am I just like dreaming? Like is any of this real? And then I'll see like a tweet or an Instagram post or a YouTube comment or just some random thing of somebody saying like, "Oh my god, like Undeath is my favorite band of all time." And I'm like, "Wow, okay, I guess this is real." You know.
No,
So it's a mix. Like I try to stay present and I try to just like appreciate everything while it's happening, but at the same time, I can't help but just keep working towards the future and just try to like take it as long as I can.
first of all, I must thank you for being brutally honest, because if you said that, oh my God, like it doesn't bother me at all, and oh yeah, this is the best thing ever, then I'm not sure like you're in the right genre, right?
No, I completely agree.
Yeah, but the second thing is, I mean, we're still like a couple of months away from the album release, and you know, press is still getting wind of it and stuff like that. How do you personally feel? I mean, like, since you said, right, like you go through those days where you struggle with, okay, does anyone really care about Undead? And here you are putting out like your second album, especially like I said earlier, after the first one did so well. How do you kind of stay grounded? I'm very curious.
Um, it sounds dark, but it's true. Like I just try to remind myself as often as it's healthy that like all of this could go away in an instant. And regardless of what that is, we could release a third album that we try really hard on and everybody hates it. And then all of a sudden it's like Undeath is over. We could like any number of things that I won't even mention could happen. And the trajectory of Undeath would just come to a hard stop in a moment. And it's something that I'm aware of. I'm aware because it's good to work hard and have ambition and to look forward to the future. And I have tons of things I still want to do with this band. I have a million different goals that I want to accomplish, but at the same time, I think it's just for keeping myself sane. It's just a matter of living in the moment that happens while it's happening. But also, like on top of that, some things that happen to our band are still unbelievable to me. We one of my favorite bands of all time is Dying Fetus, and they were a band that was massively important in getting me into not just death metal, but like more extreme genres of music in general. And I've been listening to that band actively since I was like 16. And today we just announced that we're doing a US tour with them. And that's something that at the very beginning of this band, when we were just a three-piece and practicing in like a rundown practice space downtown, and we didn't have any money and like nobody knew who we were. If you had told me like, hey man, you're gonna be doing 33 shows with Dying Fetus, I would say, no, we're not. That's never happening. But here it is, it's happening. So I just try to appreciate it all like in the moment.
So you kind of went ahead with the question I was coming through, because first of all, congratulations on that tour. I mean, like I can imagine anyone being stoked to performing with Dying Fetus, but you've also got Chelsea Grin, Body Snatcher, Frozen Soul, another band in the last couple of years who kind of blown up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we love Frozen Soul. I mean, those are like good friends of ours. And when we played in Dallas on the Black Dahlia Murder tour, like half the band came out and we just chilled and hung out with them. And they're super nice, approachable guys. And I'm like really excited to finally see their band because I haven't seen them live yet. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Wow. So you basically have like 33 opportunities now in April to kind of watch them, right?
Pretty much.
and that's awesome. I'm sure at this point, considering Undeath have kind of blown up, there are a lot of times you might be getting hit up by bands, right? Like, okay, check us out. We want to tour with you. We want to play a gig with you and things like that. I don't know. Do you actually get time to check out half the bands?
It's hard, man. I mean, I like it was not that long ago that Undeath was the kind of band where I would be like cold calling bands and like messaging bands asking to play with them. So I 100% remember what it was like. And I just try to give everything as much attention and as much like consideration as I possibly can. But like you said, yeah, I mean, I'm working on a billion different things every day, like not just with Undeath, but in my personal life. Like there's just like my day is packed constantly, and it's a lot of the time I don't really have the opportunity to sit down and listen to every band that hits us up asking to like play a show together. But I remember what it was like. I remember being that band, and I tried to just give bands the attention and the consideration that a lot of bands didn't give us when we first started, because when you reach out to a band that you admire, and you're not like asking for a lie. You're just like, hey, listen to our stuff. Like, let me know what you think. And they like leave you on red and they don't even respond to you. Like, that sucks. It's not a good feeling. So even if I know, like, yeah, we're probably not going to get any opportunities to play shows together anytime soon, I will listen to as much stuff as I can. I send people honest feedback, and I'm like, keep doing your thing. Excited to see what you guys do next, and I just try to like be as supportive as I possibly can.
You know, that's such a great answer because I have to be honest that sometimes I get like 10 bands or different bands, labels, and everything hitting me up. And then, when you've got a day job and do that, there's no way. Like, I hate sometimes looking at the number of unread emails I have. It kind of scares me, but that's just how it is. But how, tell me on the other side. I mean, considering you said that, you guys all are metalheads at the end of the day, right? For me personally, metal is something that helps me get through like a tough day, or it's also something that when I'm really in a good mood, I want to listen to. It's kind of like my go-to thing. If I may, and maybe if you open your Apple Music or Spotify, what's currently on your playlist?
Man, I'm all over the place. Like I listen to probably like from the moment I'm awake to the moment that I go to sleep. I probably listen to like 6 or 7 hours of music a day. Like it's nonstop for me, man. Like I always have to have headphones on. Like it's such a comforting thing for me to just have music playing at all times. But bands that I've been listening to a lot, well, Adversarial, I'm huge into them. I just think they're a fucking killer band. Like we were talking about before we started, just atmospherically, like just the whole vibe of them is incredible. I believe their last album is called, it's got a really long, ridiculous title. It's like Death, Endless Nothing, and the Black Knife of Nihilism.
Yeah,
it's awesome. The one with the red cover, it's an amazing record. I can't recommend it enough. Beyond that, I mean, like newer bands, there's a band called Vile Rights that me and Kyle specifically have been like geeking out over a lot recently. I think they're an American band. They might be Canadian, I'm not sure. Haven't delved too deeply into like their history. I know they're pretty new, but they're great. They're just kind of like the best parts of proggy Gorguts type stuff mixed with a little bit more just like driving straightforward American death metal sound. That band is awesome. Also, I was just thinking of another band that I was going to recommend. Who was on the tip of my tongue? Oh, there's this band Cryptae. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's like Crypt, Cryptae.
okay.
I think they're from somewhere in Europe, like I want to say Netherlands, Copenhagen, somewhere like that. They're it's like music for serial killers.
Wow.
That band is ridiculous. Like look up their Metal Archives page because their promo photo is like one of the scariest images I've ever seen. It's just like the two members staring down at you, but their whole faces are like cloaked in shadow and just their eyes are bulging out. It's like that band is scary, and I don't really use that word to describe a lot of bands, but that is like a frightening band. Love that band. I mean, I guess I'll wrap it up on the. I would also recommend this band Dungeon Serpent. They're killer. I would say they're Canadian. They put out a record last year, I think, either late 2020 or sometime in 2021. I gotta look up. I gotta open Spotify to check this one. Make sure I get the title right. It is
Oh
called
man.
World of Sorrows.
Yeah.
Yeah, this band is terrific.
Yeah, and this album
Um,
cover looks fucking awesome also.
Dude, it looks like some like a lot of bands try to get that like 90s death metal album cover style, but like I feel like that Dungeon Serpent record just accomplishes it so effortlessly. Like it's just a painting with text over it. Like there were so many demos and like forgotten EPs from the 90s that look exactly like that. So it really harkens back to a really amazing style of death metal, and it's musically it's just so literate, it's so complex, like the just there's so many like amazing solos and riffs on that thing. I would highly recommend anybody check out that record. So those are all bands that have been on repeat for me recently.
Awesome, awesome. So I know we've talked quite a bit, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. So just to kind of wrap up, you want to give shout outs to anyone? I mean, it's such a great journey to hear about just how you guys have come like in a short period of 3 years, right? So you want to give a shout out to anyone? Go ahead.
Definitely, man. I mean, yeah, there are tons of people that I don't think I have the time or the memory space to remember everybody, but because we'd be here all day. But you know, Caligari Records, great Florida-based, I believe, metal label. They kind of gave UNDEATH our first shot as a band. You know, they put out our 2 demo tapes. Really want to give them a shout out. You know, they kind of put us on first before anybody else. I want to shout out like everybody at Prosthetic, honestly, because like Becky and Will and EJ and Steve, like just a really great group of people. They've really looked out for our band. They've hooked us up with a lot of opportunities, and it's not the kind of label relationship that a lot of bands have, where it's very kind of like acrimonious, and we don't get along with them for whatever reason, but they put out our records or something like that. Like we all work together and talk very closely. So it's been great working with them for the past like 2 years or so, and hopefully we can continue to do some dope stuff together for a while. And then beyond that, just shout out to all the other great up and coming death metal bands in the US and beyond. There's so many great bands coming up right now. I think it's a really exciting time to be into not just death metal, but any kind of extreme metal, whether it's death metal, black metal, grindcore, anything like that. And there's just so much talent out there, and I highly encourage anybody who's reading this to start your own band. If you got riffs, then just get a little band camp going, like do your thing, because I'll probably be listening to it at some point with the sheer amount of music that I listen to on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think there's no better time to be in metal, right? And I've been doing podcasting for the last 3 years. I've been writing for like close to 10 years now. And at least in the last 3 years, I've been podcasting. When I do my best of year list, every year I say, oh yeah, this is the best year. And then this is the best year. And now at this point, I'm just like, you know what? There's no better time, because in the last couple of years, so many bands have been just like writing music and just channeling all that fucking rage into their riffs and their vocals, right? So
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, dude. I think if you've ever been curious about metal, if you've ever like not really known where to start, or even like if you know the classics, like if you know the Cannibal Corpses and Autopsies and whatever's of the world, like, but you don't really know where to start with modern bands, like just throw a rock. You'll hit like 10 amazing bands that you've never heard of. So there's so much good stuff out there, and I would encourage everybody to take a chance on something you've never heard before, because you'll probably discover a band that's incredible.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Bandcamp also, because Bandcamp has this cool feature on the website where it just kind of scrolls and you keep seeing like stuff that people are buying. Or if you just like follow random people, you can see things that they're buying. And that's like a great way of discovery, I feel, which is kind of missing
Definitely
elsewhere on social media.
And also too, like on top of all the bands, there's so many good labels right now. Like off the top of my head, I mean, you got stuff like Maggot Stomp, stuff like Sentient Ruin out of Oakland, Gurgling Gore. It's a great like slam label. There's just like so many good places that are putting on like new and up and coming bands. If you, I would encourage a lot of people to, if you really like a band, see what label they're on, and then just listen to everything else that label has put out, because a lot of labels are very curated these days, especially the really small ones. So generally, like if you like one record that Sentient Ruin put out, you're probably gonna like 80 to 90% of the other records they put out.
That's true. But thanks so much, Alex. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I wish you all the best, and have a great time on tour.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate your time.
And that was Alex from UNDEATH. What a great chat. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, definitely check out their album, It's Time to Rise from the Grave, which is out via Prosthetic Records later this month. As always, do subscribe and follow our channel on YouTube and just keep track of our website, The Metal Wanderlust, for more such great interviews. Until next time, horns up and cheers, everyone.